In 1994, The Mask made Jim Carrey a superstar, launched Cameron Diaz's career, and gave us one of the decade's most memorable villains. By 2026, one walked away from Hollywood completely, one disappeared for 10 years, and the villain died alone in his apartment, with music playing for days before anyone noticed. Here's what actually happened to the Mask cast after 1994. The retirements, the comebacks, the tragedies, and the ones who quietly built something completely different. Jim Carrey. Most people remember the green face, the teeth, the spinning head. Stanley Ipkiss putting on the mask for the first time and becoming something physics couldn't quite explain. Jim Carrey was already building momentum before this film, but The Mask was the year everything locked in. $30 million opening weekend. A performance that was essentially one man and an animation department creating something nobody had quite seen before in live-action comedy. What followed was one of the most extraordinary runs any comedic actor has ever assembled. Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber, all in 1994. 3 films, 3 different tones, all of them massive. He followed that with Batman Forever, Liar Liar, The Truman Show, Man on the Moon, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. The range kept expanding. The ambition kept getting stranger. By April 2025, his total global box office earnings crossed $6 billion. That puts him among just 53 actors in history to reach that level. The number is almost difficult to process. And then, in 2022, he announced he was stepping back. Semi-retirement, essentially. A decision to step away from what he called the all-consuming machinery of celebrity. He'd been talking for years about finding something quieter, about painting, about the spiritual dimension of his life that the industry had made increasingly difficult to access. He sold his longtime Brentwood home in August 2025. He remains selectively active, returning to voice Dr. Robotnik in the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, because that role apparently still interested him enough to show up for it. In February 2026, he made a rare public appearance at the 51st César Awards in Paris, France's equivalent of the Oscars, where he received an honorary César for lifetime achievement. He delivered his entire acceptance speech in fluent French, which, honestly, is exactly the kind of thing Jim Carrey would do. There was also an automated metadata glitch in June 2026 that briefly reported his death across several platforms. It wasn't true. He's alive. But it's a reminder of how thoroughly he's stepped away from public visibility, that a rumor like that could circulate without immediate correction from anyone close to him. His paintings, which he's been sharing publicly for years, tend toward the satirical and the surreal. Political figures, pop culture imagery, figures from his own past, rendered in vivid color, with an edge that suggests the comedic instinct didn't go anywhere. It just found a different surface to work on. He is 64 years old. He is painting. He is, by most available accounts, considerably happier than he was when he was making $100 million a film. That probably tells you something about what the machinery of Hollywood actually cost the people inside it. Cameron Diaz. She played Tina Carlyle, the nightclub singer, the love interest, the woman in the red dress. She was 21 years old and had never been in a major film before The Mask. This was her first. What came after is one of the most successful careers launched from a single debut role in Hollywood history. The Mask, to There's Something About Mary, to Charlie's Angels, to Gangs of New York, to Vanilla Sky, to The Holiday, to Bad Teacher, to The Other Woman. 2 decades of consistent, varied, commercially successful work. She became one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood during the 2000s and early 2010s. And then, in 2014, she stopped. Not a hiatus, not a sabbatical. She stopped. Married guitarist Benji Madden in January 2015, stepped away from public life almost entirely, had a daughter named Radix in 2019, and built a life that had very little to do with film sets or press junkets or any of the infrastructure that comes with being a major Hollywood actress. For 10 years, she was essentially gone from the industry. And during that time, she started a wine brand called Avaline with her friend Catherine Power and built it into a legitimate business. In interviews about her return, she's talked about that decade as something she needed. Not a breakdown, not a crisis, just a recognition that the version of her life built around constant production and publicity wasn't sustainable. She wanted to be present for her actual life rather than constantly performing it. The industry found that strange. She didn't particularly care. Then, in January 2025, she came back. Her return film, a Netflix action comedy called Back in Action, amassed 46.8 million views in its first 3 days. Not a quiet return, not a small test of the waters. The audience that had waited 10 years showed up immediately. In April 2026, she starred in Outcome, a dark comedy directed by Jonah Hill alongside Keanu Reeves. And she's been confirmed to reprise her role as Princess Fiona in Shrek 5. She's 53 now. The comeback is real, and she's managing it on her own terms. Selective, collaborative, unhurried. Honestly, the 10-year pause might have been the smartest career move she made. Peter Greene. He played Dorian Tyrell, the primary villain of the film. Cold, controlled, genuinely menacing in a way that grounded a movie that could have floated entirely into cartoonishness. He was one of those character actors that directors kept calling because he could make anything feel real. The same year as The Mask, he also played Zed in Pulp Fiction. Another villain, a completely different register, equally memorable. That's a remarkable double in a single year. His filmography across the 1990s and 2000s ran almost 100 credits. The Usual Suspects, Blue Streak, Training Day, Justified, Chicago PD. He kept working, steadily, consistently, in the kind of roles that don't generate award campaigns but keep a career alive. His manager described him as a perfectionist, someone who always wanted to get the performance exactly right, someone who, despite a reputation at certain points in his career for being difficult, was described by the people who knew him well as genuinely kind. Arguably one of the greatest character actors on the planet, his manager said after his death. He worked with everybody. He had fought demons across his life. Drug addiction, a difficult period in the mid-1990s that included a suicide attempt in 1996. He'd come through it. His manager later said he had fought his demons but overcame them. The people who knew him in his final years described someone who had found a measure of peace. Still working, still passionate about the craft, still making plans. On December 12, 2025, police were called to his apartment in Manhattan's Lower East Side for a wellness check. A neighbor had noticed music playing continuously in his apartment for several days. He was found on the floor. He was 66 years old. A note was found that read, "I'm still a Westie," a reference to his roots in Hell's Kitchen, New York. He had been scheduled for a medical procedure that same day to remove a benign tumor from near his lung. His manager had spoken with him the day before. He said Peter had sounded fine, a little nervous about the operation, but fine. In February 2026, the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner confirmed the cause of death as an accidental gunshot wound to the left armpit, ruling the manner of death accidental. He had been co-producing a documentary about the withdrawal of USAID funding, working alongside Jason Alexander and Kathleen Turner. He had a new film, Clica, that was released posthumously. He had another project lined up with Mickey Rourke set to begin in January. He died still working, still producing, still planning what came next. Richard Jeni, he played Charlie, Stanley's loyal, wisecracking best friend. The guy who listens to the problems, delivers the reality checks, and gets the second best lines. A supporting role, but one that required real comedic timing to land, and Jeni had it. Off-screen, he was primarily a stand-up comedian, and a genuinely excellent one. His HBO specials ran through the 1990s and earned him real critical respect. He was the kind of comedian who could fill a theater and make it look effortless. People in the industry considered him one of the best working stand-ups of his generation. Jerry Seinfeld, who knew the stand-up world as well as anyone, described Jeni as one of the funniest people he had ever seen. Nobody knew what was happening underneath it. Richard Jeni died on March 10, 2007. He was 49. The cause was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. A subsequent coroner's report documented a profound and largely hidden battle with clinical depression, schizophrenia, and psychotic paranoia, conditions that had never been publicly known during his lifetime. He was 49, still performing. Still, to the outside world, one of the funniest people working. There's a specific kind of grief that comes with losing someone who made people laugh for a living. The gap between the public face and what was actually happening is always hard to sit with. With Jeni, that gap was enormous. His industry remembered him as a talent who deserved considerably more mainstream recognition than he received. His loss is still felt by people who saw him work. Amy Yasbeck. She played Peggy Brandt, the journalist, the one who inadvertently sets the film's plot in motion. A smaller role, but a memorable one. Her post-mask story is largely defined by something that happened off-screen. She was married to actor John Ritter, the Three's Company star, one of the most beloved television comedians of his generation, who died suddenly of an aortic dissection in September 2003. He was 54. He collapsed on the set of his television show and died the same day. He had shown no prior symptoms, no warning, nothing. The loss was sudden and complete, and Yasbeck, in the years that followed, channeled her grief into something concrete. She became a central figure in the John Ritter Foundation for Aortic Health, an organization dedicated to raising awareness about aortic disease, advocating for earlier diagnosis, and funding research into the condition that killed her husband. She has testified before Congress on the subject. The foundation has influenced how aortic disease is screened and discussed in American medicine, which means her work has almost certainly saved lives that John Ritter's death couldn't save his own. In 2026, she's begun a gradual return to acting, appearing in the 2025 short film Fireflies in the Dusk. Selective, careful, on her own timeline. She built something meaningful from the worst thing that happened to her. That's not a small thing. Peter Riegert. He played Lieutenant Kellaway, the detective perpetually on Carrey's case, the straight man in a film full of controlled chaos. The role required someone who could hold a scene together while everything around them was being exaggerated for effect. Riegert was exactly right for it. He is now 79, and he is still working. That's the whole story, and it's worth saying plainly because it's rarer than it sounds. A career actor who has maintained continuous presence across 5 decades, from Animal House in 1978 through to recent prestige television including Succession, without burning out, without reinventing himself for the algorithm, without needing a comeback because he never went anywhere. He's talked about his approach to the craft in terms of what he calls a mensch philosophy, a Yiddish term roughly meaning a person of integrity and decency. Stay collaborative, focus on the character rather than the billing, show up prepared. The unglamorous fundamentals that keep a career alive when the industry moves on from everyone around you. What's quietly remarkable is the range of that career across 5 decades. From John Belushi comedies in the late 1970s, to Roy Scheider thrillers, to indie dramas, to network television, to HBO prestige productions. He never got locked into one thing. He just kept finding new rooms to work in. He's 79. He's still working. Some careers are their own kind of achievement. Jolie Fischer. She played Maggie, the co-worker, the secondary romantic interest, the character who gets comparatively little screen time but makes the most of what she has. Fischer comes from a complicated Hollywood family. Her father is Eddie Fischer. Her half-sister is Carrie Fisher, which means she grew up inside the industry's particular kind of pressure before she ever appeared on screen herself. She built a steady television career after The Mask, most notably through Till Death, the sitcom she co-starred in for 4 seasons. What she's doing now is considerably more interesting than most of her castmates would have predicted in 1994. She currently serves as president of the SAG-AFTRA Los Angeles Local, the labor union representing actors and media performers. Her administration has focused specifically on bringing production back to Los Angeles, fighting the industry trend of filming elsewhere for tax incentives, and strengthening the union's relationships with lawmakers at the state and city level. She's also developing a portfolio as a television director, which means she's simultaneously advocating for the people who work in front of the camera and learning to run things from behind it. The combination of union leadership and directorial ambition puts her in a genuinely unusual position, someone who understands the industry from the performer's perspective and is now trying to shape the conditions that performers work in. The supporting actress from a 1994 Jim Carrey comedy is now one of the more significant figures in Hollywood labor politics. Weirdly, that's a perfectly logical arc for someone who grew up watching the industry from the inside. The rest of the cast, where life took them, not every story from this ensemble needs a long segment, but some of these are worth knowing. Tim Bagley played Irv Ripley, a small role, easy to overlook. What he's built since is harder to overlook. He's become a prominent figure in LGBTQ+ representation within the entertainment industry, with his recurring role in HBO's Somebody Somewhere earning him an ensemble win at the 2025 LGBTQ+ Cinema and Television Awards. Late career recognition for someone who spent decades doing solid, unflashy work. It suits him. Jim Doan played Detective Doyle, Kellaway's partner, the comic relief of the police procedural subplot. After racking up over 50 screen credits, he retired from acting in 2009. He now teaches performing arts and directs student productions at Harvard Westlake School in Los Angeles, one of the most academically demanding private schools in the country. He runs improvisational masterclasses and mentors student playwrights. The guy who played the bumbling detective is now shaping the next generation of performers. That's a quiet, useful kind of second act. Nancy Fish played Mrs. Peenman, the hostile landlord who made Carrie's life difficult before the mask ever got involved. She was 88 as of 2026, and she is not acting. She is volunteering nationwide with the Fuller Center for Housing, a grassroots organization that builds and repairs homes for people in need. Full retirement from the screen, full engagement with the world. The ones who didn't make it this cast lost more people than it gets credit for. Reg E. Cathey played Freeze, part of the villainous syndicate surrounding Dorian Tyrell. He had a relatively small role in The Mask, but what he built afterward was anything but small. He became a significant figure in prestige television, a core cast member of The Wire, a recurring role in House of Cards. In 2015, he won a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Guest Actor in a Drama Series for his work on House of Cards. That's a real award for real work, earned 2 decades after The Mask. He died on February 9, 2018. Lung cancer. He was 59. He won his Emmy. He left behind work that holds up. That's not nothing. Dennis Forrest played Sweet Eddie, another member of the syndicate, a smaller presence in the film. He died on March 18, 2002, from a massive stroke in Los Angeles. He was 41 years old. No long career to look back on. No reinvention arc. Just a working actor, gone. One film, one summer, 1994. A cast that went in more directions than anyone on that set could have predicted. For a lot of people, The Mask still lives in that one image. The green face, the spinning head, Jim Carrey doing something nobody else could do. Real lives, it turns out, are considerably more complicated than that.